Hey, Bob.
Hi,
You gonna introduce us?
I guess so. First, let's say welcome to another episode of Sobering Truths, which is a podcast of Arkansas Family Coalition. If this is the first time with us, we're glad to have you. And if it's you've been with us before, we're glad to have you back. And if you have been with us before, you know that this is
Iris Stevens.
She's the co-host for today, and I'm Bob Hester, another co-host for today. We've been working together for a long time. We're going to try to muddle through some information today and
Definitely muddle through.
see what we can come up with. But I'm going to say this up front. Everything we cover is it's costly. It's costly to who, Iris?
All of us, every one of us. I mean, every one of us is paying the cost for alcohol, and we'll get into that in a minute because we're going to talk a lot about the health effects and the health cost. Because we all know how our insurance has gone up over the years. I know my car insurance, even though I don't have wrecks, I don't drive enough to have wrecks, and I'm overly cautious, my insurance has gone up like $30 a month just without having any wrecks. My health insurance has gone up, my house insurance has gone up, and all of that can be attributed to other reasons too. But alcohol is one of the big ones.
One of the huge ones. Let me, before we get started, remind everyone about our 12-page booklet. It covers a lot of stats about all kinds of things, how alcohol is connected to so many different things. And, you know, when you get into these things like we're going to be talking about today, when you look at the figures and the money and the numbers, it's very astounding. It's just almost unbelievable when you start hearing these numbers and think about them and compare it to the individual and then the overall country.
Yeah. And I think one more thing that I think we probably have mentioned in every broadcast, that we're not calling for prohibition. You know, we're calling for basically what they did with tobacco. Everybody knew that tobacco was good, at least here in the last 30 years. You know, doctors used to recommend cigarettes. They would actually advertise different brands like Marlboro and Camels and stuff like that. And then later on, obviously, you know, we knew that tobacco led to all sorts of, you know, heart and lung cancer and things like that. So what we'd like to do is see what they've done to tobacco. Now, you know, except in Arkansas, it's pretty rare that you see people smoking, and it's certainly not celebrated or really accepted.
You mentioned that. Some time back, I saw an old program, and if I'm not mistaken, there was a doctor on there recommended a certain brand.
Yeah.
I think that's true. Now that
I
you
remember
brought it
I've
up.
done the research
Yes.
on that. I don't remember seeing much of that myself, but I remember seeing the research on that, you know, of course, who were they paid by to recommend tobacco? They were paid by the tobacco people. Now, who's recommending alcohol? The alcohol people.
Yeah, and we're so glad, thrilled. These cigarettes and smoking need to be addressed, and we need to do everything possible to keep the younger people from taking up smoking and doing the damage that they're doing. I saw a commercial just the other day, and it showed this person, and if you looked at that, I don't see how you could ever start smoking.
Exactly. Or we're talking about the ones who are in their COPD
Yes.
and wearing and they look
It
like
was awful.
skeletons,
It was
and you know, you
awful.
find out that they died, you know, just
Right.
weeks after the commercial, and they were only 54. And that's what we need to be doing with alcohol, because alcohol is so damaging. We've covered a lot of that, but we're going to continue to cover even the costs of it.
One more thing I want to say. My dad was a smoker. He was a good man, but he was a smoker. And there's no doubt in my mind that it took, know for a fact it took 10 years off his life, and probably took 20 years off his life. Now, a lot of them, we'll get into this after a while, but a lot of people who habitual drinkers drink a lot of alcohol, they die very early, and we'll cover how many years that takes off their lives and how many years that adds up total. It's just astounding and again, almost unbelievable when you hear the numbers.
Yeah, it is. It really is. It's billions and billions of dollars that we're losing in a lot of productivity. We'll cover those. What I wanted to cover today was kind of a very brief continuation of what Joyce covered last week, and that was the Fetal Alcohol Syndrome. And there was a fascinating story in the U.S. in the Daily Mail out of Britain about a young woman. She's an adult now, but she suffers from fetal alcohol syndrome. And she said, you know, and you can look it up, it's in the Daily Mail. Her name is, she goes by in the article, the name of Jade. She didn't want to give her real name, and she's 17. To look at her, she seems perfectly normal, but she said when she had gone to the doctor, she picked up a magazine and was reading about dementia, about Alzheimer's dementia, and realized the symptoms were those that she had. And she said she came home and told her adoptive mother because she had been adopted. She was a fetal alcohol syndrome baby. And I think her adopted mother actually has 3 other adopted children too that had the same symptoms. She said, I've got dementia. And her mother said, no, you don't. But it is. And she said, and I'm going to read parts of this here. Obviously, I'm not going to read the whole story. But she reveals the horror of living with fetal alcohol syndrome. As experts warn, drinking when pregnant is worse than taking heroin or cocaine. She said, Dr. Mary Mather, who's referenced in this article, warns of extreme effects after just 1 unit. And a unit is not like a bottle, it's a typical drink when you're pregnant because, that alcohol passes through the placenta into the baby. And she said she warns just 1 unit of alcohol can stop the fetus breathing and moving after 2 hours. Now, that's temporary, but just think if you continue to drink every day, what happens? She said, this is what Jade said, after reading a leaflet on senile dementia in her doctor's surgery, Jade, who did not want to reveal her surname or where she's from, recognized the symptoms and went home to tell her mother that she had dementia. Now, new research has found that the effects of just 1 unit of alcohol can stop fetus breathing and moving for up to 2 hours. FAS, Fetal Alcohol Syndrome, expert Dr. Mary Mather appeared on the morning alongside, this is a television show this morning, alongside the host to talk about the latest findings and warn mothers to stay clear of any alcohol during pregnancy. She said, alcohol can be worse for your baby than taking heroin or cocaine. Of all substances, cannabis, heroin, or cigarette smoking, alcohol is the most serious. She says the impact is worse with alcohol than anything else, both on the baby and the child's subsequent ability to learn. Alcohol creates more damage to growth, development, and learning than Class A drugs. She said this is based on a huge amount of worldwide research. In the cases of FAS, it is mainly the frontal lobe of the brain that deals with executive functioning that is affected. Alcohol passes from the placenta to the unborn baby and can damage the brain development. Dr. Mary said that children with FAS have smaller brains and the connections between the 2 halves of the brain, the 2 hemispheres, are thinner. She says, and they have more fetal alcohol syndrome cases than with muscular dystrophy, spina bifida, Down syndrome, and HIV combined. That means that amazingly we get this information out and too many young women who are pregnant or thinking about getting pregnant are not listening.
There needs to be an effort. Thankfully, this information is beginning to get out from the medical.
Yeah, it's in all the television shows.
But it's time that we as grassroots movement people begin to put this information out there and encourage people to take some specific actions that we will get into later on. Because this is incredibly bad.
It's not necessary. It's a totally unnecessary problem.
So most of everything in this booklet and all these things we cover about alcohol are unnecessary. They don't have to be if we will make up our mind to address the situation. But first, again, we've got to understand, and I think hopefully this program will get out to enough people that people will begin to understand and will begin to be motivated to take some action.
I think a lot of the people that listen to us initially are probably aware of a lot of this. It's the people outside that they may need to be sharing this with that may not be aware of it. Because you've worked with it for years. I've been familiar with it for years. And so it's standard practice for us to know it. But it's the people out there that we're not having any conversations with that will not know. And some of this stuff was even new to me, especially the fetal alcohol syndrome being that bad just with one, like 1 or 2 drinks.
Have you got some numbers on, cost numbers on that?
I don't have specifically for the fetal alcohol syndrome,
but
I have. Oh, please.
Yeah, let me see if I can. The FAS, fetal alcohol syndrome, affects about one infant for every 1,000 live births in certain areas of the United States. This is kind of different across the state. across the United States. The prevalence of FASD in children varies from 1% to 5% in select communities. Some estimates suggest that approximately 40,000 babies may be born with FASD in the United States each year. 40,000 each year. That's 400,000 in 10 years. That's almost 500,000 in 10 years. Again, totally uncalled for. Preventable, easily
Totally
preventable.
preventable.
Totally preventable. Okay. It's estimated that this FAS or FASD cost the United States $4 billion annually. Just this one thing. We're not talking about wrecks and prisons and other kinds of diseases. We're talking about this one
First of all, they have
effect.
huge costs because a lot of them are born prematurely. They stay in the NICU for a long time. Those costs are just unbelievable. And then what else do you have?
Well, the cost of fetal the FAS in the United States is estimated, as I said, about $4 billion annually. The annual estimates for the cost of all individuals range from 926 to 3.2 billion. And in 2002, the lifetime cost of care, this is unbelievable, for a person with FAS was estimated at $2 million. $2 million to take care of them in their lifetime.
I'm surprised it's not even more because a lot of these
Well,
children
this is estimate,
require,
so it may be. For some of them, it probably is. This
you know,
may be an
some of them
average or
require
something.
24/7
Right.
specialized
Yes.
care, and
Yeah.
then all these or a lot of these children are in the public school system and special ed programs and stuff. A lot of them have special caregivers and things, so just the cost of that alone is just astronomical.
And the people who cause this do not pay for it, right?
As a rule, no. As a rule, these are
for
insurance
large-
and taxpayer costs.
And we, the public,
Yeah.
pays for it.
And the thing about it is of course, obviously we're going to because it's a compassionate care. But it's, as we say again and again and again, it's unnecessary. It's an unnecessary cost to the children and a cost to the taxpayer and whatnot because if you don't drink, you don't suffer these problems.
Yeah. And if we get to it after a while, when we get into I don't know what you got on, but the cost of the health care, I've got some figures on that too. And it's our health system is being overwhelmed. I think we all understand that. And so I'll have some numbers here in a minute, but you go ahead with what you.
Well, I had looked up a study. This comes from the NIH because they can do really wide studies, and this was basically a U.S. size study they had, and I'm not going to read this whole thing because it's boring when people read it to you. But the title of it is Alcohol Attributable Medical Costs in Commercially Insured and Medicaid Populations. The reason they separate that is because anything other than Medicaid is commercial insurance. And so they did a study. And I think there were over 200,000 people in the study, and it was countrywide, to look at the cost of alcohol and the cost that it's adding to our insurance. And I'm going to read this. We find having a diagnosis attributable to alcohol is associated with higher annual per person healthcare expenditures in both commercially insured, that's my Blue Cross, and Medicaid insured participants. Of course, I'm on Medicare, you're on Medicare, but that's still, ours is still considered part of that commercial. Medicaid is for those people who cannot, low income, who cannot afford commercial insurance. This is just amazing. This is per year. $14,918 and per year, respectively, for the cost that we're paying attributable to alcohol diseases. Now, we may not have it, but that's how much our insurance is having to pick up to pay for those people who are chronically, using alcohol. And this is not people who are hopelessly, like lying on the street. These are people who are medium drinkers. It says specifically. Approximately half of the deaths attributed to alcohol were caused by chronic conditions that involved medium or high average daily alcohol. And so that's what's scary is it's just medium drinkers that think nothing of coming home and having 2 or 3 beers or 2 or 3 glasses of wine in the evening. And they are contributing to the cost because it goes into medical cost, conditions of the heart, liver, gallbladder, pancreas, make up a lot of those costs. And then, of course, the 7 kinds of cancer that people develop after years of drinking like this, where people think, oh, it doesn't hurt to have a few beers of an evening, or, a few glasses of wine or an evening. When you do that daily, and I want to show this because this was interesting. It's a chart, and I know you're not going to be able to see it, but you can see the chart. This I pulled off from one of the government websites, and I didn't put it down there, so I'm sorry about that. And it shows what alcohol actually does when you drink it. It says it breaks down into certain chemicals, and we've got 4 different mechanisms here. And the first 3, it damages your DNA. It breaks those strands of DNA. And the last one is it leads to a greater absorptions of carcinogens. So when we're exposed to carcinogens, which we are probably on a daily basis, drinkers are more likely for that to impact them than non-drinkers, just because the alcohol itself creates that pathway. So, to me, this is a visual image of what's happening. And I don't know about you, I don't like things messing with my DNA, And of course, that's also what happens with fetal alcohol syndrome. Go ahead, Bob.
Well, all this, not just this FAS and FASD, but all kinds of problems related to the alcohol affects our health system. And I want to, I knew that our health system was, something will have to be done because it's beginning to fail. But in the United States healthcare system is stressed, and I got this off the internet, due to factors such as increased employer health care costs, downward pressure on employee wages, and challenges in caring for an aging demographic. That's us.
Oh, definitely us.
That's us. And the baby boomers just came into that. Is it last couple of years? How many? Maybe millions got on Social Security and whatever. So that's
and now they're talking about being broken by like 2030.
Right, and so another article said the coming collapse in the U.S. healthcare system. Hospitals and clinics have shut down services and all vital patient services. It is not uncommon to hear that healthcare. I think this was from Time Magazine. Healthcare system have shut down pediatrics, psychiatry, obstetrics, and ICU. So my point in that is the alcohol that we're talking about, this FSD and all these other things, are affecting that big time. And so if we can stop some of these problems from alcohol use, then that can help our health care and help us keep our health care longer.
Exactly.
So that's the thing we want to keep emphasizing. We may do it ad nauseum or whatever, that this affects everybody.
Right.
It's not a few people over here we're talking about. We're talking about everybody in the United States this affects.
Yes.
And do you think now would be a good time to get into that what it costs each individual?
Well, I've got some substance abuse costs. Now, this is primarily alcohol. But it says, I wanted to get into how much the groups who are funding this, how much the alcohol lobby makes, how much and some of these others, of course, we will be talking some about other substances besides alcohol. They're all addictive, and they're all, what do they say, mess you up mentally. But we're talking primarily about alcohol. The sale of alcohol exceeded $128 billion, or 2.5% of the GDP in 1998. Now, we can add probably a whole chunk of money to that at this point. But even though I did find, in looking at stuff, I did not copy that down, fewer of our younger people are doing the drinking. Unfortunately, we've got people in that younger quartile that are using other methods. They're not using alcohol as much as they are using pot and stuff. But the alcohol is coming. But the alcohol lobbies are paying. They're making money, billions and billions of dollars on us. And listen to this: the societal costs of substance abuse and disease, premature death, lost productivity, theft, violence, including unwanted and unplanned sex, as well as the cost of interdiction, law enforcement, prosecution, incarceration, and prohibition, are, however, greater than the value of the sales of these addictive substances like alcohol. So no matter how much the alcohol lobby or the alcohol producers are making, even that amount of money is way below what it costs us to deal with the effects of the alcohol.
When you use that number, and I've got them in my office, the amount that they make and taxes that, they'll say, well, we pay taxes.
Oh,
and
Jonesboro, that's a big
yeah,
one,
they'll pay taxes. But if you figure all that in, it name does not come close to the cost to the people.
And then that's just the costs that we've mentioned here. That's not the cultural cost of growing up in an alcoholic family and having these problems, and growing up in a family, maybe not alcohol, but just drinks on the weekend. Let's just have a party and all drink on the weekend, because that gets into the culture. That gets into
That's what we've
expect.
got now. Exactly. We have got a culture of alcohol. People don't give it a second thought.
Yeah.
And many people in the churches even don't give it a thought.
And that's why the churches don't respond the way they have, 150 years ago. I look at the temperance movement because I've always been interested in that, and where women belonged in this. And that was a woman's movement. That was one of the first women's, you might call a women's freedom movement, was the temperance movement, because they got sick and tired of their men going down to the saloons, getting drunk, coming home, beating the wives, beating the kids, not holding a job, not, and the woman would have to go out and do laundry just to keep food on the table. And so we have the women's temperance movement that got involved, and people kind of laugh about it. But, it's perfectly understandable. Of course, that led to, the concept of prohibition. That led to the concept of Jonesboro voting itself dry, Craig County voting itself dry. What was it, 1946?
44.
44. So women have had a major impact on whether or not alcohol was accepted.
And you mentioned some of these things, and I've often said that, people were not sitting around twiddling their thumbs and saying, well, we've got nothing to do. Let's go out and start prohibition. There were reasons those people did that. Serious
and I just mentioned
reasons.
them. Yeah.
Just like we've got now, although we're not promoting national prohibition. But we've got the same situation now, probably worse than it was when the temperance movement started. And there's always
because they didn't drive cars back then, and you didn't have 20,000 people
exactly. That's
injured
one thing.
or killed on the roads as a direct result of an alcohol-related accident.
Back then, you also, correct me if I'm wrong on this, you didn't have all this government subsidies.
Government support.
Support.
Yeah.
Okay, so you had...
There was no health insurance in
so you had people on street,
1890.
whatever. If you remove that right now, how many people you think would be on the street?
Oh, that would be millions.
Millions on the street right now because of the alcohol.
Because we've got the subsidies, the government subsidies nobody thinks about.
Nobody thinks about it because they give them money and they've got living places and they got...
and because we have insurance that's underwritten by government, as well as commercial insurance. And so, it says, and this one that came from the Georgetown, University of Georgetown, everyone pays for these costs. Consumers pay in the form of higher prices for goods and services. Employers and employees pay higher health insurance premiums. That's one of the reasons they go up. And I hear that, Arkansas is considering increased health premiums and even going to different, insurance groups because of the expense, So that's an issue. Taxpayers pay higher taxes for the public expenditures of health care, law enforcement, the judicial system, incarceration, as well as prevention and treatment programs. The price also is reflected in the need for foster care and homeless shelters. Substance abuse also hinders economic growth and diverts resources away from future investments.
When that's exactly why I am so upset about this, and why when I begin to investigate and look at the facts on this in 2003 is when I began. I was astounded. I was amazed. I was shocked. And that's when I said, I don't believe people can know how bad this is, or they would be trying to do something about it. And I've been trying for almost anywhere from between 5 and 10 years. I think this book was 1919. It was about 5 or 6 years old. Trying to get people's 2019. Sorry about that, not 2019. Trying to get people's attention, but I'm having trouble with getting people's attention. They don't seem to.
Well, it's because big deal.
Listen.
I don't have an alcohol problem. I don't think. That's what they're saying to themselves. I don't drink at all. I can't stand the taste of it, and I don't like the effects. But I think a lot of people down there. Well, that's Bill. If he wants to drink, that's his business. We have a kind of a libertarian attitude. Well, if you're not causing a problem for anybody, But how true is that? Because I think we're looking at statistics that show that there are more problems out there than what libertarians accept.
I've just saw something yesterday or the day before about San Francisco. I think it was the guy on the podcast. He was talking about this guy who claimed to be a libertarian that he was talking to. And so Charlie Kirk, he brought up San Francisco. He said they're libertarian. He said they don't enforce laws against any kind of drugs. As a matter of fact, the government will give you stuff like that. And he said, is that a good place to live? And of course, obviously, it's not. So this libertarianism, if these people who call themselves that will think this ought to the final outcome, they will realize this makes no sense. Man is not going to do right on his own. It never has from the beginning and never will, and that's why God ordained government and authority to take care of that. It's clear in the Bible. So this, let's don't have laws against anything and everything will be okay. That's the biggest bunch of
because the attitude is always, hey, you're right to do what you want to, ends at the, throw a punch ends at the, into my nose. However, we look at the culture now and we look at, that's been disproved. Look at our culture right now.
This, I've been saying, because the CDC estimated that every man, woman, and child in America, alcohol use and abuse cost them $807. And that was a few years back, so it's probably more than that now.
Yeah, I found $1,300.
Well, I did figure out. Let's figure out how many people pay taxes and all that. Yeah. And the number I came up with, somewhere in the vicinity of $1,400.
Yeah.
So if you
if you're a taxpayer worker,
if you're a husband and wife and you both work,
yeah,
you pay twice that. You pay
like
$1,500.
They always do per person, and that makes it look less.
Yes,
then when you figure out
now what could people do with that $3,000? I think they could spend it a whole lot wiser than on.
And think about how that cuts into
the problems that are created by alcohol.
It cuts into the economy too. If you're taking out this much money, say $3,000 a year per, couples out there, think about how that affects the economy. 3,000 times however many couples that you've got, that's an enormous amount of money. I was looking here at the workplace productivity, and according to the CDC, they estimate that the U.S. economy loses $179 billion every year due to alcohol-related decreases in workplace productivity. That's just in workplace productivity. People who, can't come in Monday morning because they were on a binge all Saturday and Sunday. I mean, that's just one example. So, that's a lot of money. If you're just looking at the money and not even looking at the cultural effects, you're just looking at money. It's.
Yeah, if you just look at the money, I think that's serious enough. I mean, that's no way near the worst part of it. Serious enough to take steps to correct this as much as possible. But when I think about the pain and suffering, like 40% of child abuse connected to alcohol abuse. You can't. Some of those things that people will never get over them. When they're abused. I remember looking some information up about serial killers, and this one serial killer was. And I think 70% of serial killers were from alcohol was either involved in they either drank it or they had an alcoholic parent that messed them up. And this one, I think he was up in Missouri. I think he killed like 70 people. He was a farmer or something like that. But alcohol is connected to, if it's bad, you can almost be guaranteed alcohol is connected to it in one way or the other. And
you almost have to be a drinker to be able to do something like that. Right. You have to deaden your psyche to be able to do something like that. It's just, I know alcohol was responsible for 100,000 of the 1.8 million cancer cases. When you look at that, I mean, what's that going to cost? Because sometimes it's totally unnecessary. You develop cancer because of the drinking. It's one thing to live a clean life, and I'm talking about substance, live a clean life and develop cancer. People are going to do that.
It's going to happen.
But when you do stuff like the smoking and the drinking that we know ahead of time has a really good chance of causing you to develop that kind of a problem, and then we pay the cost of it because you go into the hospital out there and they have to spend $1 million on you to take care of you, to fix you and everything. And that $1 million causes my health insurance to increase, your health insurance to increase. I'm not saying we shouldn't do it. I'm just saying that's the logical result.
There comes a point, though, when you can't do it. You know, when we're $35 trillion in debt, we're living in a dream world. And sooner, somewhere down the road, some of this has to stop. And if we will stop it on the front end, that would be the right thing to do. We don't want people not to be taken care of, but let's stop this stuff on the front end where we don't have to. It don't break our health system. It don't break people. Don't put people into poverty. It don't damage people so severely that they'll never be regular human being. You know, they can't live a normal life.
Well, I know, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to inform people so that, that they or their family or their friends can say, look, this is just not worth it. But I think I love animals. You know me, I love dogs, I love cats. I like animals. I try to be real careful about saying I like animals more than people, but I'll have to admit, it gets close sometimes. And the Clydesdales came to Jonesboro last weekend. And I have loved the Clydesdales. I love these huge horses. You see them, and their feet are like platters, and they're usually so gentle and everything. I just love them. And what did the Clydesdales come to do? To advertise what? Budweiser.
Budweiser. I don't know.
And of course, the whole town is lined up, to watch it. And you're torn. I'm torn between loving these huge, beautiful horses, and then what they're advertising, because I know what it does to people.
Right in the middle of a town and county that's supposed to be dry.
Exactly.
And here we come out, and we're advertising something that's bringing death and destruction.
It makes me wonder, why didn't they just fill it up with Marlboros, and we could drive the Clydesdales down the center of town advertising Marlboro cigarettes? I mean, it's the same effect.
Yeah, exactly.
So I don't know. There's just so much to cover. We just don't get to cover enough in each of these meetings, but that'll keep us on air longer.
Well, we will cover that before we go. I think our time is about up for this podcast. Again, free booklet for anyone who will call 870-910-0464 and ask for it, and ask for it for your church, for every member, every family, or every member in the church, whichever. We'll give out however many you want if it's a legitimate request, and get this information out. And most of this information is covered on the internet, but it's not as comprehensive, not as compact.
It's not put together. It's all
as this is.
Compact.
It don't take you long to go through that, but people need to go through it on a regular basis.
And you've got the references in there too.
Yeah.
So that helps if people want to go back, verify it.
So that's about it for this time. We'll see everyone hopefully next time, whenever that might be.
And have a good week.
Absolutely.